Joining me today is a scholar of communication whose work focuses on misinformation, media effects, and political persuasion. He's the author of Misinformation and Society and the head of the Media Effects, Misinformation, and Extremism Lab at the University at Buffalo. Professor Yotam Ophir, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
So, to start, your research covers media effects, misinformation, conspiracy theories, and extremism across political and scientific communication. Before we get into the substance, I want to start with how you actually define some of these terms. So, how do you define misinformation and propaganda, and where do the two overlap?
Right. So misinformation is basically every bit of knowledge or information that is wrong. It can be something that somebody spread on purpose to mislead others, and then we usually call it disinformation. Or it can be a rumor or a mistake that were just done by accident, and then I usually use the term misinformation for that. Um, Propaganda is the intentional persuasive campaign that tries to push some agenda or messages to a population, often with the intention to also mislead and kind of distort at least the truth a little bit. So one is more general. Misinformation is the umbrella term for all of these, and one is more intentional, which is the propaganda stuff.
Interesting. You recently published a book, Misinformation and Society, which argues that misinformation is not a new problem tied to the internet, but has been part of a human communication for centuries. So, what is taking this longer historical view of misinformation change about how we understand the problem today?
Right. So part of the motivation for the book was the rise in academic and journalistic and public interest in misinformation around 2016, a year that was marked by two things. Well, basically three, but two political things, one technological. The two political things were the Brexit vote in England to kind of disconnect the ties with the European Union, and in United States, the Donald Trump victory in the 2016 elections that caught experts by surprise. And both of these political events we were not fully prepared for. And when people try to make sense of it and kind of try to answer a question like, how come the United States elected a person with no political background, with no experience, a person who's been known to distort the truth quite often? And for many people, the answer was, well, it has to be misinformation. Like they brainwashed people, or they I don't know, managed to lie to them effectively enough to get people to support him. The same was said about Brexit, that basically the reason why so many British people voted for it was that they didn't understand the meaning of what they were doing, right? Or the plan. Um, so those are the two political things. The third one that kind of happened in 2016 is that it became obvious to many of us that social media was beginning to be used for misinformation. Now, social media has been around since the early 2000s, but it was never used so effectively and efficiently for political purposes. And in 2016, after we've learned about the Russians' interference in the elections, it became clear that we need to pay more attention to that as well. Anyway, why am I making this argument that it did not start there? Because I think that building this narrative that it all started in 2016 puts the blame on individuals like Donald Trump or the Republican Party or Fox News or social media. And I think those are simplistic explanations. And if you try to fix something with a simplistic explanation, you come up with a simplistic solution, right? And simplistic solutions will not work here. In my view, misinformation is part of who we are. It's part of being a human. It's baked into our DNA. We are not truth seekers. We are not accurate creatures in any way. And we were never married to the truth in any given moment in time. And when I say never, I don't mean the last 2,000 years. I'm talking about since Homo sapiens began to roam this planet. They were not truth seekers. That was not a big part of their survival mechanism, to be accurate. Um, yeah, so looking back in history, seeing how far documented misinformation goes, and understanding the evolutionary and psychological origins of it are pushing me away from those simplistic claims that, it's Trump. Because if it is Trump, then we just need to replace him with somebody else, and then everything will be solved. That's not the case. Misinformation was here before him. It's going to be here after him, and it's just part of the human condition.
Yeah, so you talk about this argument that humans are not natural truth seekers and that we actually evolved to identify immediate risks rather than process complex or distant threats. So, how does that sort of fact just shape the way that we understand how propaganda and misinformation actually function in the way that they take hold of people?
So I'll clarify what I mean by that. I mean that humans, in the hundreds of thousands, if not more, years in our current state, when humans were trying to survive, they had other priorities than being right or being accurate. Two of the main priorities that we had were to stay alive. To do that, we needed to avoid risks and avoid threats. And the second thing was getting along with others. So the two things that we are really good at is avoiding threats, getting along with our peers. If you leave the cave, let's say you're a caveman back in the day, and you leave the cave and you see something moving in the bushes, you don't have the privilege to go and check it out. You don't cross your sources. You're not fact checking. You just turn away and run. If you don't run, you're gonna be eaten by a tiger or whatever, and then your genes will not, replicate for future generations. Now, same goes to social cohesion. If your tribe, if your group believes in something, let's say they believe that the tiger that you just saw in the bushes, let's say your tribe believes it to be a god, and they tell you you have to go to the tiger and feed it. It's God. God loves us. He's not gonna hurt you. Even if you think that he's not God, you better do it. Otherwise, your tribe will probably kill you, or by the very least shun you and get you, get you banned. In both cases, you will not be able to procreate, meaning your genes will not replicate, meaning you're not with us. So all of us, me, you, everybody else, are the kids of people who turned away, believed their eyes, especially when something scary or dangerous came around, and got along well with others. Now take it to our times. Um, People hear all kind of wild conspiracy theories, right? Let's say that COVID-19 was manufactured by politicians trying to take over the world. Okay, is it accurate? No, it's not. Do they have evidence? No, they don't. But it's scary, and I have this tendency, right, baked into me to avoid scary things. So I'm gonna pay attention, and it's believed by many others. And if I'm part of a social group, let's say a political party or religious ideology and so on, religious belief, if I'm part of a group that believes in something, especially something dangerous and scary, I will tend to comply with them, even if I disagree with them. So all of these evolutionary biases kind of open us up to misinformation in general and conspiracy theories in particular.
So, is there anything that we can, I guess, do to sort of overcome these inherent deficits in our ability to discern what's misinformation or what's propaganda, especially in a day and age where it seems like almost everything has more to it than just what they present as facts?
Yes and no. There are things we can do to ameliorate the risks, and we can talk about some of these. None of them is easy to do or simple, but there are ways to approach it. But you will never eliminate these tendencies. It's part of who we are. We've evolved very slowly for many, many, many years to be like that. So you can't just change human nature in a couple of years, you know. And for most of our history, it didn't matter much because let's say that you were wrong about this tiger in the bushes. I mean, the worst thing that's going to happen is you might die, which is not great, but or let's say you do believe it's a tiger, you run away and it's like it was not a tiger, it's just a bunch of berries that you could have eaten. It's a loss for you, but it doesn't matter for the universe, right? I mean, it doesn't matter for the earth in general and other creatures. These days we are in a different place. Now if we're going to make big mistakes, let's say big mistakes about climate change, that's going to affect not just all of humanity, but the whole globe. I mean, every creature and every tree on this globe. So the stakes are much higher, and we do need to fight our instincts, as you suggested. And we can do it to some degree. We will never completely overcome it, but we can kind of condition ourselves to go against our nature, if it makes sense. Kind of to second guess ourselves and to take an extra moment to think about something before we, act on it or before we share it with others and so on. Do you want me to talk about specific solutions? There are quite a few. None of them works, so that's the that's the bad news. There are things we can do on the individual level, right? Like me and you, when we see something interesting online, we see something like super exciting and super engaging and sensational. We can take an extra moment to check the source of it, to see what other news sources are saying, to learn the history of the source itself. Like, is that a credible source? Did they spread bullshit in the past? Um, we can double kind of check other reliable sources that we know to make sure that everybody's on consensus, have a consensus around it. If it's a scientific argument, check what the scientific community is saying, not what just one scientist is saying. To do that, we need better media literacy, which requires better education. Um, we're not there yet. I mean, I'm glad that people like you are learning about these topics and that you're curious about it and your schools are encouraging you to look into it. That's fantastic. But many schools do not do that, and in many schools, students learn very little about the internet and about media in general and about who owns the media and who makes money of it and what kind of motivations they might have that affect what you see on your TikTok, feed or whatnot. Um, so yeah, we need better education. So we will have better citizens, more prepared for what's to come. We need better regulation of misinformation. Currently in the United States, there is basically none. I mean, seriously, there is so little that the government is doing to prevent misinformation. And it's true for Republicans and it's true for Democrats. It's not like one side or the other. America is very much lagging behind other countries in regulating social media, in regulating artificial intelligence, in regulating misinformation in general. So we need to change some of our legal systems to fit the crisis that we have with our information these days. And we need to find a way to strengthen our democracy, which is definitely harder than the others. I mean, there is a growing social tension in America over the last 20 years. There is a lot of public disappointment with mainstream politics. Both the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, I believe, failed the American people to a large degree, especially middle class. And when people feel that they don't have a voice in mainstream politics, they look for alternatives, right? And those alternatives are much less dedicated to the truth or to accuracy or to the public health and safety than we might want them to be. So, yeah, quite a lot of things to do, but none of them is easy. Now, of course, you can just say, why not just correct misinformation. Like every time somebody says something wrong, let's just correct him, right? We've been trying this for many, many years. The scientific and kind of study of corrections goes back about 40, 45 years now. We're not very good at it. Apparently, once a person believes in something, it's quite hard to move them away from that belief. We sometimes manage to get people to change their opinion, but they still have some emotional attachment to the misinformation. Sometimes we can't even reach people because the misinformation is so strongly tied to their social identity and to who they are and to their belief system at large, right? So we can try to fact check and correct, but it's very, very hard. And many, many studies have tried to do it in all kinds of creative ways, including my own work. We are just at the very beginning of understanding how to do that. So maybe all of these solutions together can do something, but it's complicated.
Yeah, on another difficulty that makes it so hard for us to actually solve this problem, in your book, you argue that assigning blame to any single source gives a false impression that fixing one thing would solve the problem. So, if misinformation spreads across so many different sources and channels, what does a meaningful response to it actually look like?
That's a good question, right? I mean, for a long time, people blamed Facebook for the misinformation problem. I mean, and you can change the rules of Facebook to moderate more content or to block users who are problematic and whatnot. None of these solutions seems to work. I mean, take Twitter for example. Twitter before Elon Musk, not the current version, not X. Back in the day, after the 2020 elections, Twitter decided to remove the account of Donald Trump from their platform. So he was basically deplatformed, we call it. He was deleted, along with all of his very long history of tweets and whatnot. And this guy had a lot of followers. He had about 70 million followers, so it's a big deal. At the same time, Facebook did the same and YouTube did the same. Did we solve the problem? Well, it depends on how you look at it. On one end, immediate studies that were done just after Trump was banned showed a pretty dramatic drop in misinformation on Twitter. So you could say, okay, that's great. I mean, we found the problem. The problem was there is this one guy who spreads a lot of falsehoods. But did the misinformation go away? I don't believe that. I mean, people just left with Trump and moved to other platforms like Parler and Gab and later on Truth Social that he himself runs, right? So basically, you're dusting the problem under the rug. It's still under the rug, you just don't see it. And maybe it's now much worse because if the misinformation moves from a place like Facebook to a place like Parler, which is kind of a more extremist version of Twitter, then there is nobody there to even monitor it or to fight it back or to even just flag it as problematic. So yeah, believing that the problem is a specific person or a specific website or a specific app, I'm sure today many people will point the finger to AI and chatbots and ChatGPT and whatnot. I think it's missing the mark. Those are tools that we use to spread misinformation, but they are not they're just symptoms. They're not the cause. They're not the root cause of misinformation.
Yeah, on a similar note, in Misinformation and Society, you argue again that before effective solutions can be even implemented, we first need to decide who's actually responsible for the problem. So, between governments, platforms, individuals, social media, how should that responsibility actually be distributed?
Yeah, you're right. And there is no simple answer because people disagree about this question. Different people have different opinions. Even different experts will have different opinions about that. One of my arguments, which are not maybe the most optimistic ever, but I think realistic, is that every choice that you make here is going to have some downsides. Let's take the most obvious actor to kind of act upon misinformation, which is the government itself. Do we want the government to censor misinformation? Now, some countries do that. Some more totalitarian countries do it all the time. So places like China and Russia and so on, and these days maybe Hungary and yeah, some places already do it, meaning that the government interferes all the time with newspapers and with free speech and so on and so on. Some democratic societies do that, by the way. In Germany and in Austria, it's illegal to deny the Holocaust. I mean, it's illegal. You can go to jail. You can pay a big fine for saying that the Holocaust did not exist. Obviously, because these specific countries need to kind of come to terms with their own part in all of this. Do we want the same to happen in the US? My opinion is no. And again, some experts might disagree. But I'm worried that, first of all, censoring misinformation is not very effective, in my opinion. So people will find a way to spread it anyway, even if it's illegal. You may even make it more attractive to some people by making it illegal. And second, I don't know if I trust the government to make the right call on misinformation. Um, today I may agree with the president, hypothetically, and tomorrow I may not. I mean, it gives too much power to the sitting president and the sitting administration in a way that I am worried could be abused for solidifying power and controlling others. The United States is built around the First Amendment. That's one of the core kind of beliefs of this nation. And I think it's for a good reason. And I'm a big believer in not censoring and not making things illegal like speech because it never ends well. You can ask the social media companies to do it, but why would they? I mean, it's none of their problem right now. They are not legally accountable for what's happening on their platforms. This is a way too long of a discussion to have in a few minutes, but a bunch of rules, one specifically called Section 230, make it so that, Zuckerberg and Elon Musk and the guy from Reddit, Hoffman and so on, they are not responsible for the stuff people say on social media. I mean, if somebody says something about you, like defame you or something like that, you can take the person who said that thing about you to courts, but you can't take Facebook. That's Section 230. They're just a technology platform. So if we want social media companies to help us fight misinformation, we need to maybe remind them that they are responsible for what's happening on their platforms. We need a legal kind of change in our legal system. Anyway, yeah, we can go on and on. Every actor that you choose, there are some advantages, but there are some obvious issues as well. The best, most promising avenue I can think of is education and literacy programs, but even this is more complicated than it sounds because who gets to decide on what kids learn in school? I mean, at the end of the day, politicians to a large degree. So how do you make sure that politicians are not abusing their power um, to affect our educational efforts against misinformation? Anyway, no simple solution, but you're right that deciding who needs to even do that will be a very big hurdle to pass. Yeah.
We are sort of in an unprecedented age in which anyone can put their thoughts and information out for everyone to see and can attract a vast following as opposed to traditional media, which was usually the primary source of information. So, how has social media kind of changed the propaganda or misinformation environment? And has it just accelerated what was already happening, or is it new problems?
It's complicated. I mean, every question you ask is complicated, which is good. That means the questions are good. But we thought at first when the internet was just kind of beginning to catch on, we thought that it's going to democratize information. That basically, in the internet, producing content is relatively much cheaper, and everybody can open a blog and everybody can open a profile in like um, Substack or just a Twitter account or whatever, and speak up their mind. But honestly, in the 30 years ish since social media caught on, the internet caught on, we've learned that it's not that easy to make your voice heard online. I mean, sure, you and I can open an X account and say whatever we want, but how many people are going to hear us? I mean, very few. You and I can come up with a fresh new conspiracy theory, but how many people will learn about it? Very, very few. Study after study show us that the biggest creators of misinformation are still the elites. I mean, by elites, I mean politicians, journalists of some specific outlets. Most journalists are not trying to misinform us, but some are, or let's call it the media to a large degree, think tanks that work with all kind of industries that have big stakes, economic stakes. So, industries related to fossil fuels, for example, and so on and so on. So, sure, you and I can come up with misinformation, and I'm sure we do it all the time. I mean, all of us make mistakes all the time. Some of us lie all the time. But the amount of damage you can do is much more limited than what the president of the United States can do, a senator, a congressman, or a host on Newsmax or Fox News. So I think that at the end of the day, if I have to choose, I will focus on the elites and not on regular people like you and me who may make mistakes here and there, but have a much smaller audience.
Definitely. Your book also uses cases like Brexit and COVID-19 to show how misinformation shapes real public behavior as opposed to just online discourse. So, what do these cases reveal about how misinformation actually moves from something people encounter online to something that changes what they do or believe in the real world?
Yeah, in general, misinformation doesn't stay online. Crazy thoughts may start off in crazy places, but they have a tendency to spill over to mainstream discourse. Take something like Pizzagate, the idea that Hillary Clinton was running a pedophilia ring from the basement of a pizzeria place in Washington, D.C. Absolutely zero evidence that any of that is true. It started off in the fringe corners of the internet. It started off in places like 4chan, but then somebody picked it up and brought it to Alex Jones. Alex Jones has a conspiracy theory empire called InfoWars that has millions of listeners. So now a story that started off in the corners of 4chan is making it to, let's say, the mainstream of misinformation. But then from there, people picked it up on Twitter and people picked it up on Facebook. And then CNN started talking about it, and then NBC and Fox News. It just spilled over. Those things don't stay online. And once they spread enough, we begin to see their impact in the real world. Pizzagate ended with a guy driving for several hours to that pizzeria place with a gun, AR-15. It's always AR-15 for some reason. And he burst into the restaurant with a loaded gun, and it was a miracle that no one got hurt. But he did shoot a couple of bullets into the doors there, trying to find the basement. The place didn't have a basement, by the way. But the point is, it did not stay online. And conspiracy theories like the Great Replacement that suggest that there is a nefarious attempt to eliminate white dominance in the Western world, including in America. That was the motivation behind the terrorist attack downtown here in Buffalo a couple of years ago, and the shooting at the synagogue in Pittsburgh, and many, many more events like that. So misinformation does not stay online, and you're right that all kind of events like COVID-19 can serve as accelerators, let's say, of this translation from online to real world, right? And we saw the rise in misinformation, conspiracies, and even violence associated with misinformation during COVID-19.
Definitely. To close, I just want to get your opinion. You've been studying propaganda and misinformation across political, health, and science communication for over a decade. And while there's obviously no magic solution that's going to end it all, if there's anything we can do that would make it even a bit better for other people, I think it's very important. So, with that being said, what's one piece of advice you would give to someone trying to think more critically about propaganda and the misinformation that they encounter every day?
I think if I have to choose one, it's not following individuals, following the consensus instead. So, when COVID came along, you can always find like that one scientist, and I'm even talking about a person with like a PhD or an MD and like years of experience, that's gonna say something outrageous, say something that's kind of completely out of the ordinary. And then people are like, okay, he's a doctor or he's a scientist. He knows what he's saying or she knows what she's saying. That's not how science works. Science works through a collective effort. Science is about consensus. I think people should be skeptical of individualists who go against the consensus. I'm not saying that they will never be right. Sometimes, once in a blue moon, a Galileo comes along and kind of challenges everything we thought we knew about the universe. But by and large, if you're making a sensational argument, I need you to show me sensational evidence. So we need to be skeptical of individuals. We need to trust the system and the scientific kind of collective effort instead, but not being cynical. The difference is very important. A skeptic asks questions and asks for the data and the evidence. A cynic is just saying, I can't trust anyone. Like everything's a lie these days, and I hear more and more of that in recent years. So learn to be skeptical, learn to find, reliable sources and separating them from more problematic ones. But don't lose faith in humanity. I mean, don't lose faith in institutions of knowledge. I mean, most of the scientific endeavor is still very good at identifying falsehoods and promising avenues toward truth. Journalism at large is still dedicated to reporting the truth. They make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes, but there are some institutions of knowledge that are still better than others at informing us.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being here, Professor
Yeah.
Ophir.
Thank you.